Guys, welcome back to the channel. On the last episode, we built a tubular front core support and installed some headlight buckets in that. On this episode, we are going to continue working on the front end, but this time we're going to go and work on the turbo system. So we are going to work on getting an intercooler partially made up, and I'll explain that, why partially, here in just a minute. And we are going to work on getting our turbos chassis mounted and supported for this build. So stay tuned and I hope you enjoy. Okay, so this is what we're going to be making up. I need to plasma cut out this part. This is going to be the actual turbo mount. This here is a slider ring that allows us to adjust the turbo along its axis, its angle. And then this section here is welded to the frame, and this gives us our stack up for height. So what we have on these turbos is they mount with these little rings, and these rings clamp in the actual turbo or the turbine to the main body. So what we're going to do is we are going to leave these the way that they are, and then we are going to stack this mount on top of this so that we don't mess with any of the clamping pressure or anything like that. So that is how we're going to mount this. So I'm going to export all these DXFs and fire out the plasma. Just a friendly reminder, if you ever plasma cut with a dry process, don't use a water table, wear a mask. This mask was brand new when I started. I had this door open the entire time. This is how much particulate would have went into my lungs. So even though steel in itself isn't toxic, it's definitely not good. You know, you could do some fiber damage to your lungs and stuff from that particulate. So just a word to the wise. Okay, so this is what we got. This is the bottom plate that's going to get welded to the frame. This is the swivel plate, so this allows the whole thing to rotate if we want to adjust the turbo alignment. And then this is the ring that goes up into the actual turbo over top of the clamp plates. I did pull this out and check these. This works. I actually had to recut them because this ID here was just a little too tight and I couldn't slide it in against the bearing housing. So now it fits, it all works. So what I'm going to do now is we are going to align these and get them all welded up, mirror image on both sides, and then we'll start working on getting them mounted to the frame. Okay, so there we go. So we got this bottom section here. This will be mounted onto the frame. I did kind of screw up. I should have made one of these like not all the way slotted, because if you have both of them slotted, the bolts can slide along. But it's not really a big deal. They clamp up nice and fine. The only thing I will say is I need to either trim this turbo flange slightly, just give her an old kiss with the mill or something, just to clearance this bolt hole. So I just can't get that bolt in and this bolt in. I can get either one in depending on how I rotate the flange around to get them started, but I can't get that one started with it in, basically. So gonna need to tweak that, maybe shave the top of that bolt down just a touch, and maybe the top of that one, and that'll help me rotate a little bit more, and then we'll be good to go. But overall, I like this. This will work. This should hold the weight, no problem, but the intention here is that if I want it to, it can flex side to side. That way, if there's any side to side movement on this, it won't flex the turbo housing and cause any rotor strikes or anything like that. So that's something we want to avoid. So we just want to hold the weight off of the exhaust, and that's what we're going to do. So what I'm going to do now is mount the turbo back up on the truck, get this thing adjusted, and then tack weld this flange in. Not too bad. So we got both sides welded up solid, mounted good. So we got them nice and straight here. It's hard to tell on camera, but they are nice and symmetrical. And so yeah, that's gonna be nice and solid. So if you push down on this, this is completely supported. That takes all the weight off the bellows. Now, if we do a little bit of side shift, we can get a little bit of flex in the side, but that's fine. I kind of want that not too rigid in this direction, just so that these turbines don't get any side to side shift. So pretty happy. So next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna pull these compressor housings off, and we are going to try to weld on some quick disconnect furls. So wish me luck. Okay, so I had the one compressor housing off. This is what we're gonna weld on. This is a like an HD furl, and we're gonna weld this guy on here. I'm not going to trim the turbo back. I'm gonna use this raised section here as sort of a heat sink and burn this whole thing in. So that should leave me a nice weld line there. So I'm gonna go ahead. I'm actually gonna mess around with some practice parts real quick, just make sure I got my settings dialed in, and then we'll get this all cleaned up and then burn it in. Not the prettiest welds in the world, but they will work. They're gonna be solid. So I'm gonna call that a success. I'm gonna pull off the other housing and then get it welded up as well. Okay, so those are all welded up. Next up, we'll get the intercooler core out and we'll start working on that. Okay, so this is going to be the intercooler core that we are going to use. This started out life as a 22-inch long by 11-inch tall and 6-inch thick vibrant intercooler core. This intercooler has been cut down to 18 inches because my buddy had it and it was damaged in shipping. So this is the section that was cut off, and you can see I was practicing already welding the cover plates back on. So that's what we're gonna have to do here. We're gonna get this guy, we're gonna weld a cover plate here to cover up this bad section, and then we're gonna seal this top edge here by burning it in. So this should weld up fine. This thin brazed material has a tendency to weld a little bit dirty, so I won't be surprised if I get a little bit of trash up here on the top, but that should be okay. We can get that cleaned up. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to measure this. I'm going to cut out some 1/8 inch plate here. This is 3003 aluminum, 1/8 inch thick. I'm gonna cut that out to size and then get that welded on down the sides here. And the only tricky spot is right here. I want to make sure that I don't get too crazy and melt this good row of fins out. But if it does get a little bit damaged, we'll put that to the back. You'll never see it. It'll be in a shroud, and it won't really hurt our performance that much. The front edge here got a little bit better cut on the bandsaw. There must have just been a little bit of taper on the bandsaw blade. So no biggie. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Okay, so let me show you what we got. Full transparency, I'm pulling a little bit of the fin, just the tip there, so you can see that the edge is degrading. But that's about as good as I'm gonna be able to do. The big thing here is, you know, the plate is thick, the fins obviously pull a lot of heat out, so you need to start sinking heat into the part in order to get the heat to catch the bar, what's left of this bar. And because of that, you have a tendency, you can't feather and just walk up to the edge. You're either hammering it or you're not forming a puddle because all the heat's going into the intercooler, because, well, the intercooler is pretty good at transferring heat. So that's what we got going on. I'm just gonna have to deal with that. I mean, that's gonna be what it is. So that edge may be a little distorted, which cosmetically isn't as pretty, but you know, what are we gonna do? So probably not gonna notice it through the grill anyway. And then this is gonna get Cerakoted black, which is a super thin coating. So it'll be black anyway, so you won't see it. I'm gonna flip this over, burn the other side in, and then we'll work on burning in the ends. Okay, so that side went a little bit better. There was a little bit more meat there to weld to. This side here was fine. You got to really put some heat in and really, I mean, I used a full yard-long piece of filler metal to fill this because, you know, you're filling in the fins left over from the cut. So it really sucked in a lot and you're pulling in a gap there. So got that all buttoned up. It's sealed off, so now we don't have to worry about any of those cut fins, you know, causing problems. We did have to grind just a little bit of edges and stuff. I wanted to clean this up, so we will have to flush the intercooler out and make sure that we don't have any aluminum dust in the intercooler before we weld the ends on, because we don't want to pull a Rob Dom and pump a bunch of aluminum through the engine. So we'll get that cleaned out, get this whole area cleaned up, and then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get on the lathe and I'm going to make some little mounting bosses here. They're just going to be like 1/2 inch long pieces with a 1/4 inch 20 thread, and get those sort of ready to go. Actually, I think they're going to be 3/8 16 thread. So we're going to get 4 of those made, and then we'll get those welded on here as well. Okay guys, so I went ahead and just turned these little bungs here on the lathe. They're just 1-inch diameter aluminum stock, and I welded it on. I had a bear of a time welding these little pieces to this tank. So basically what would happen is the heat would flow into the intercooler, which obviously is a very good heat exchanger to the air, and you'd get the fitting super hot, and this would just not want to melt. I mean, you had to dime it to really get the heat going. So was able to finally get them welded on. They're just not pretty, not even as pretty as my other ugly welds. So it is what it is. What I'm going to do now is I got these little grommets, and these have a lip in here. And we're going to make some mounts. So they're made for 1/8 inch plate, and this will go in our 1/8 inch plate and hold this on the outside, and then the bolt will go through the inside as it's shown. Obviously not this long, and that guy will hold the intercooler. So this will have just a little bit of cushion and allow just a little bit of flex, but it'll still be captured. And then that plate will be here, and we'll get that sort of mocked up on the truck and see where it needs to sit, and we'll figure out basically what we need as far as height and stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead, get the plasma set up, get the little mounts cut out, and then we will get to setting everything up on the truck. Okay, so this is what I cut out, and you can see one here already mounted up. Of course, I have the right bolts, but did not get the right washers yet, so I'll need to get some washers. But basically, you can see this just gives a little bit of cushion to the intercooler. It keeps the, you know, sort of the shock off of things and allow things to sort of twist and flex as the chassis moves around, but only so far because the rubber bushing should protect it. So I'm going to get the other one mounted on, and then what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to go over here to the truck. The dilemma I need to figure out is I need to get the intercooler low enough that the top will clear the hood and line up with the throttle body, and I need to get it low enough there, but high enough that I have these pointing below the bottom edge of the intercooler so I can get the piping in. So we're gonna probably sit the intercooler up here, do some measurements, and then I'll get that sort of figured out. And then once we got that, we'll pull this out. The core support that is, we'll get that pulled out, put it on the bench, and then we'll try to just tack up some tubes to hold it. We're gonna use this little 1/2 inch tubing that we use for the headlight buckets and triangulate it pretty stiff. And yeah, it should be pretty strong. It's just a matter of making sure that we get it right where we want it. So I'm gonna get this all laid out, and we'll see how it looks. Okay, so this is kind of a balancing act. So what happens is if the intercooler is too low, I am blocking off the bottom portion of the intercooler. There is a little bit of air slotting here, but if I get much lower than that, I'm behind the bumper. If I get too high, I start getting into hood mount territory where the the latch will actually be out here somewhere, but you still need to put the shroud on top of this, or the collector, the outlet, and then run the tube up here. And you can see we're, pretty close. So basically what I'm gonna do is I have it set up now where I think I'm right in the middle. I have good optimization to the airflow in the front. I have enough space here where I can get a good exit curve of the intercooler, because you want all this to sort of flow, right? So if you pinch the top, you're gonna cause a pressure drop on the outside. If you pinch the bottom, you're gonna have basically a port entry angle, and you'll have probably localized high velocity streams and low velocity streams then in the center, high velocity streams on the outside. So your goal is to have a big enough plenum that you can equalize the pressure and therefore try to equalize the distribution. Because I do refrigeration engineering as a living, and we work with these as coils, refrigerant coils, and pressure drop, while important, heat transfer wise, you can't make up heat transfer area easily. So utilizing your heat transfer area efficiently is important, and in order to do that, you need to make sure that you have good flow distribution through all of the coils. So we need to make sure that in order to do that, we have enough space down here out of the turbo that we can build a big enough plenum in order to do that. So I think this is a good compromise. I have an idea for the top plenum. If I can't do that idea, which I'm not going to talk about right now, we could always run a aluminum tube from this to there. You can see here, it's hard to show on camera, but the bottom of the throttle body is basically, if you ran a straight angle, it's just slightly above this edge, so it intersect. We should have enough room to weld something on there. Worst case scenario, we'd have to run like a little pie cut or something just to change the, run a straight out this way and then do a pie cut up. I want to try to avoid that because I don't think it looks that great, but it is a backup plan if we need to. But overall, I think this is pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead, measure this up where it is, and then we will recreate this on the table and sort of get everything clamped up and find out where it needs to be on the table. Okay, so I got this welded up and installed. I put triangle bracing here, tied into here, tied the bottom in. This guy here basically will take the most of the hanging force. This guy here is just stabilizing it forward and back. Added some little gussets in the corner because if the car ever gets, rock side to side, there's a lot of weight there. So we just want to lock that in. So overall, I'm pretty happy with this. I think it's going to be very solid. It's surprisingly strong. So I guess the next thing we got to do is get it on the truck and figure out where our turbos need to feed into here. So that's up next. Okay, so I got everything modeled up. I'm going to go ahead and load a sheet of aluminum onto the plasma cutter, and we're going to try some of our first cuts here with the plasma and aluminum and see if we can get this all knocked out. So going to get some material loaded up and let's go. Okay, so I got these cut out and they came out pretty good. Not a lot of burr or anything like that. I just ran a file down the edge and they literally all just popped off with like a single stroke. So not too bad. The only thing is, since we plasma cut these, we have to dress the edges because the edges oxidize pretty bad. And I did weld a little sample piece and you could see the floaters coming to the top. So I'm gonna go ahead, just take a clean flap disc, a fresh staff flap disc for aluminum, and just sort of dress all the edges where we're gonna weld. And then we'll go ahead and get these all bent up. Well, I got them all bent up and I'm gonna get ready here to sort of get everything placed and tacked up. I need to acetone everything, get all the you know, markings off it and everything. So we'll give it a whirl here. I'm gonna crank the frequency up. These outside corners melt away quick, and frankly, I'm not that good at them yet. So first I'm just gonna tack everything up, try to get the gaps nice and tight. And then we'll work on the back section where you can't see first, and see if I can get my welds burned in. I did practice on some scrap obviously beforehand, but you know, we're gonna give her a go here. So yeah, let's get it cleaned up. Okay, so that fitment was a little worse than what I wanted, so I had to do a little body hammering, but we can still grind everything clean and take all the blemishes out of it and polish it up later. But what I'm gonna do now, I got everything tacked together, all the gaps tight, and now I'm just gonna start working and on burning it in. Well, there you go, guys. So I got this all welded up solid and it looks all right. Welds aren't perfect. I got a couple good stringers in there, but like I said, I'm sort of learning. A lot of starts and stops. So we'll get that figured out and keep working with aluminum. It's just like anything else, you just need more practice. So I just went ahead and did a little brush job on it, try to get sort of even sheen. And then I think this will actually end up being Cerakoted when it's all said and done. But yeah, so what we're gonna do next, I'm gonna get mounted back into the core, or back into the core support, and then we're gonna throw it up into the truck, and then check our fitment to our turbos, and then see how our tubing needs to come out of here. I have a pretty good idea, I laid it out in CAD, but I just wanna verify before I start making pie cuts. Okay guys, so I got the tubes all welded up, and it was a little tricky, I'm not gonna lie. So what I did was, I made the pie cuts. I'm gonna try to get the camera in here. I made the pie cuts, and what I had a problem with was, okay, now that I made the pie cuts, how do I keep the relationship between the turbos mount and where the pie cuts go into the intercooler manifold? And basically what I decided to do is I used some little epoxy putty. Let me show you here what we got. It's just this stuff you see at Walmart. It's the cheap, I don't even know if I have it sitting here. It's on the floor. You can see it's that quick steel or steel stick of putty. And all I did was I just took some and kneaded it up in a little ball and then stuck it on each tube when the tubes were all clamped up to the turbos. And that was enough to hold the position until I got the intercooler back out. I did try to tack them in place. It's a nightmare to get in there and weld, and it just wasn't working. So that's what I did. I just used a little putty to hold them in place, popped the intercooler back out, tack welded them back up pretty solid, put 3 good stitches on it. And then I took the epoxy off. The heat actually sort of delaminates the epoxy and it pops right off. And then you can just use a wire brush to clean it up. And once I had it stitched, mounted it back into the truck, checked everything, and everything looked good. So then I went ahead and finished welded everything to the intercooler. Now, the one thing I will say in full transparency is this guy here, when I welded it to the manifold, it looks like it sort of ticked up this way. And because of that, it got a little bit shorter. So the angle moved upward and it got a little bit shorter, basically because that inside of the radius there where I welded it pulled a little bit and probably shifted a little bit. So that turbo is actually 32 degrees. And this turbo is 30 degrees. This side of the intercooler is a 1/16 of an inch in. This side is where it belongs. So not a big deal. We have plenty of give in the intercooler with the rubber mounts that we made, and everything is good. So that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you guys like this. You can see here we have a nice big opening underneath the intercooler, and I'm pretty happy with the way everything went. I'm not gonna lie, it was tricky. I'm not a very good aluminum welder yet, but it is what it is. On the next episode, we are not going to finish the intercooler. That has some special stuff coming for it on this top end that we're gonna do. But in the meantime, we are going to start working on our hot side and make our rest of our exhaust system and pass it back the back of the truck. So stay tuned. Hope you guys enjoy the content, and we'll see you next time.